No, by the time you get to that, right, by the time you're actually taking away a right that is necessary for a well-functioning government, now you're actually involved
It's
in
not
fascism.
necessary for a well-functioning government.
You're limiting the power. You're actually putting the power in men. So now men control the government. So yeah, that would actually start to be trending.
Wait, hang on. Well, okay, so I mean, then 18-year-olds control the government, and 17-year-olds don't. They're disenfranchised.
So if now you're talking about why do we enfranchise?
No, I'm pointing out. I'm
age?
pointing out something important here.
Yeah,
This is
you're
still
changing the subject.
No, I'm going to stay on the subject. Use of force
So-
rather than persuasion, democracy. I still haven't heard a single Christian nationalist thought leader that you can name who has any sort of serious following, any sort of political following, has any sort of moxie that can get this
sounds
done.
like a big following, but yeah. So I think like this is a thing that people can test and go see like what actually are Christian nationalists.
Yeah, who
arguing
though?
for.
Can you name a name? Can you give me the name?
No, I don't.
Because there isn't any, Richard. There's none who aren't using.
Yeah, that's
and by the
checkable.
way, so Richard, here's Richard's entire argument reduced. This is wild. And you can, if I'm straw manning this, I would like you actually to correct
Okay,
it.
yeah, you
but
bet.
isn't it the case that what you're saying here is, as long as Christian nationalists utilize persuasion and democracy to change any amendments we don't like, any laws we don't like, and we utilize only persuasion and democracy to do that, and then enforce those laws tailored to our preferences, that is not indeed fascism at all, is it?
There's two possible outcomes. So one is that it's not. The other is that if they start actually using violence to suppress the vote, for instance, if they actually start contradicting the humanist necessary rights-based democracy, if they get rid of the democracy and the persuasion part, now they're fascists. Right?
Well, they can limit democracy.
Once you've got billy clubs beating people up for saying things you don't like.
Yeah, I know, but nobody's proposing that. No Christian nationalist. You can't
okay.
name one. Name one.
So
Can you just name one? Just one.
What will you do if I have YouTubers out there find a bunch of names that fit that? Like, what behavior would you engage in?
I would engage with those same YouTubers, and I would say, look, let's go through it. Are these people actually proposing that we're using force? These serious, like guys who can actually get this done, they're seriously proposing that we're using force in order to do anything other than enforce laws that the majority of people want because they're voting them in.
Getting rid of democracy itself then would not be an example of that. That would actually be instituting a fascist government. So
you're not getting rid of democracy by limiting it.
No,
all you're doing is putting bumpers on it, like you want.
No. Like if you take away the votes of half the people, you're actually working.
That's not destroying democracy. That's flat out illogical. Okay, well then why can't 15-year-olds vote?
So that gets to the competence argument, right? So there are people who are adults, let's say 40-year-olds, who can be declared legally under due process of law to be incompetent. And so then they don't get the vote.
Okay, so help me out here. Why is it then that if we let's just say hypothetically we raise the voting age to 35, is that fascism?
Yeah, I would say so. It's because you're disenfranchising competent people who are actually part of the society and therefore have an equal say.
Do you think 17-year-olds are a lot less competent than 18-year-olds?
So that varies case by case. So
yeah, so exactly. It varies case by case.
If we wanted to have a better system, we could have competency tests, and so decide the age, rather not by age, but by whether you pass the competency test. And then some people over 18 would not qualify as competent, and some people under 18 would qualify as competent.
What about prisoners?
That would be the most rational system.
Should prisoners be able to vote?
Say again?
Should prisoners be able to vote?
Not when they're in prison, because they've actually gone through due process.
But wait,
due process. They didn't have the right taken away.
So that's not fascism, right?
It was due process.
So
that's
you
right.
can limit prisoners being able to vote.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's not fascism.
Yeah,
but you can't limit any other voting bloc.
That's a punishment for a crime. So that's through due process, not arbitrarily.
Yeah, but it's still democracy. Let's say that you had like only people who could own property could vote. That would still be a democracy.
Yeah, true.
So the thing is like what you're saying here makes no sense. I just asked you if you limit the electorate, does that get rid of democracy? You say, or is that fascism? You said yes. The thing is, though, is that it still holds that it's using persuasion and democracy. It's still a democracy.
Yeah, in the sort of, you're using the word differently than I was. So I don't think I am. When I'm talking about rights-based democracy, I am actually talking about all competent people should have an equal say in the government, so they should be enfranchised. If you're disenfranchising people, you're heading towards fascism, because now you're imposing force.
That doesn't mean it's
who
fascist.
Don't have a participation in the government.
You see how what you're doing is equivocating here. You're using the ambiguity of the language in order to switch between two different definitions.
No.
When you said democracy here, does democracy require full participation? No. Does it require in any way, shape, or form everybody can vote? No. Can we have certain people who they have stakeholder democracy, for instance? You can vote if you meet such and such criteria.
Yeah.
You can vote if you can pass the civics test.
Yeah,
you can
true.
vote if you do this. You can vote. That still fits the criteria of democracy, doesn't it?
That is not what I meant by democracy. You're defining democracy as broadly as possible, which is fair. That's an actual use of the word. In my actual explanation, in my opening, I made very clear that I'm talking about democracy that enfranchises, and not a democracy that limits to an oligarchy, for example. So you got to have rights. To have rights-based democracy, an evidence-based rights-based democracy, all competent people should have an equal say. They should not have it lorded over them by everybody else.
Yeah, but you haven't demonstrated.
Yeah,
but you haven't demonstrated how that would be fascist if you limit the electorate to like super competent people or people who are very interested in voting rather than the most bribable portions of it, or if you just have stakeholder democracy. Yeah. Is stakeholder democracy fascist?
So I'm assuming, so like the thing is that stakeholders are everybody. Everybody's a stakeholder.
Well, no, not everybody owns property, for instance.
Any narrower stakeholder is you're actually imposing force on people that don't have a say in the government. So that becomes fascist, yeah.
Is it, so it's inherently fascist? Fascist?
It becomes fascist.
Yeah, but you see how you're using ambiguity again. You're switching between two different things. Yeah, look.
No.
If you say the use of force rather than persuasion in democracy, that's what fascism is. If people utilize democracy to limit democracy, it's still democracy.
Yeah, a fascist democracy.
That's not fascism.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So
it's a fascist democracy?
See, that's the distinction that I was making. If you're having an oligarchy, which is technically a democracy, that's not the democracy I was talking about. The one that we actually need. And so the instrumentation of that is that once a society is using force to impose on other people who don't have a say in the government, now you've got fascism operating. That's
so parents are fascist?
Say again?
Are parents fascist?
What Andrew's getting at is he's trying to uncover what Richard's underlying principle is. What does he actually think about universal suffrage, and why is it so necessary for a functioning democracy? The Founding Fathers did not enact universal suffrage at our country's inception. In fact, the United States has not had universal suffrage for most of its history. But you're trying to convince us that because of that, the U.S. has always been a fascist nation? Get the fuck out of here. Eventually, Andrew does get Dr. Carrier to admit that there are conditionals to who we allow to vote. But again, those conditionals have to fall in line with secular humanism for Ryan to approve, aka my preferences. In a macro sense, this concession is important though, because it fundamentally shifts the debate in Andrew's favor. And we all know this. Of course, we don't enfranchise everybody. For example, children don't vote. Non-citizens don't vote.
You sure about that? You sure about that?
Felons in certain jurisdictions don't vote. So baked into that is Richard's admission that his original viewpoint was incorrect. Of course, universal suffrage is not absolute. And of course, universal suffrage is not a prerequisite for democracy. And I think to the average listener, Andrew is raising some genuinely good points about who we let vote. Personally, I think we should raise the voting age to at least 25. And we should mandate some sort of public service too. Not necessarily joining the armed forces, but being a volunteer firefighter, volunteer sheriff, paramedic, something. Have some skin in the game. And I think a civics test would go pretty far as well. See, people younger than that tend to not really understand how the world works or how politics work. Oftentimes they live with their parents, they're still in college, they haven't worked or ran a business. And on top of that, if they volunteer for public service, they know what it means to sacrifice for their fellow countrymen. That's important. And if you include those three barriers to entry for voting, you'll naturally weed out people that are politically apathetic, people that are naive due to age, and people who aren't invested in the outcome of their vote. I think that would generate a lot of positive political outcomes for our country, and it sure as hell wouldn't be fascism.
Well, incompetent people aren't relevant to this point. So you keep trying to say
wait a second.
Incompetent people are not different.
I think 17-year-olds are as competent as 18-year-olds for the most part.
And if you want to persuade to actually expand the franchise to 17-years-olds,
well, but why don't I limit it to 21? Like drinking, like, oh, you're not old enough to have a beer?
There's no sound basis for that. Actually, the drinking age shouldn't even be 21.
What should it be?
It should be 18.
It should be. What's the sound basis for 18 versus 17?
As soon as you're a competent person, you should have all your rights.
What is the difference
in everybody else, and you should have
then,
an
Richard,
vote.
you're in. I don't understand this either. So then, what?
So
how do we determine, other than arbitrarily, it should be 18?
Richard says there's a sound basis anchored in evidence that determines voting age and competency should be allotted at age 18, yet he provides none. How is raising the voting age to 21 not sound, but lowering the drinking age to 18 is? He's all over the place. Of course, the voting age being 18 is 100% arbitrary, but Richard is trying his hardest to avoid admitting it. This is often what leftists or secular humanists do. They argue in favor of an arbitrary position that they just happen to prefer, but they can't admit that it's arbitrary because that goes against the narrative they told themselves about themselves, that they believe in the science. So what do? They just pretend there's some sort of evidentiary basis for what they're saying. They just make it the fuck up.
Do you even want a society where everyone has equal rights and has an equal vote who is competent? Do you want to actually take the rights of voting?
When you're talking about voting, I would raise the voting age. Yeah.
You would raise the voting age? Yeah. So that would be contrary to evidence. That'd be contrary to evidence in terms of who's actually competent.
Oh, really? When does the brain fully develop?
Well, that's not relevant to competence. Competence has to.
It's not relevant to competence.
No,
Okay.
No, not at all. Because
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no. Your brain develops continually throughout life. So
yeah, but I mean, it develops.
Being more developed doesn't make you more competent. Competence is actually meeting a threshold of the ability to understand rational decisions.
And do we test for that?
Medical ethics boards, when they determine competency, they run a competency test to determine that.
Yeah, there's a test. Is there a test for you to be enfranchised?
I would approve of one.
Yeah, I know, but the thing is that then how can you say it's competency? You can't say that these people are competent. You don't even test them.
Well,
nothing. And the thing is back to this. It also doesn't help your argument at all. How?
If someone's not competent, they can get declared incompetent. You can force the issue and have the competency test done.
Yeah, but that's different than competency in voting. Do you agree with me that there's a bunch of really, really, really uninformed voters who go out and vote anyway?
That's not the kind of competency I'm talking about. Competency when you do a medical ethics test for competency, you're not testing whether they are a scientist or have medical knowledge or whatever. You're testing whether they have the ability to understand and make decisions rationally. So that does mean that they can make stupid decisions and still be competent.
Why wouldn't you put that for like voting then? Why is that a problem to do?
Because this is the thing. There's a lot of political science on this. If you actually do that, then two things happen that lead to bad results. One is people start gaming who gets to pass the test and who not, and so you've got an oligarchy again. The other thing that happens is that you can't have a society of the governed if you're excluding people who actually are competent. If you make up an idea of competence that doesn't really relate to the competency that we're trying to talk about now.
Yeah, but you also have
can you make rational
but you have other
decisions?
issues with
if
universal.
If you have the ability to make rational decisions about your life, then you actually are competent enough to be a
but you
society.
have bad issues here too with universal suffrage. You end up with incompetent voters who can be bribed because on the short term they get things that they want.
That's not the competency that we're talking about.
It is the competency that we're talking about.
Now you're obfuscating by using two different concepts of competency.
I mean, okay, first of all, I didn't even define what I meant by it. I'm trying to use what you mean by it.
No, I'm watching you do it.
And so
now.
the second portion here that we're looking at is, again, your claim here is that suffrage has to be universal or it's fascism. When your opening statement, when I asked you to define this, and I remember I made sure I got you to do it 3 different times so that I was clear, use of force rather than persuasion and democracy. You're now saying that the democracy that you're talking about is a requirement of full enfranchisement. Full enfranchisement.
Well, I mean, apart from the exceptions we just talked about, right?
Yeah, right. So the thing is that anything outside of that is fascist? Is a fascist society?
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. Well, it depends on how it implements that. So fascism comes through implementation, right? So yeah, I would say there's definitely degrees of fascism there.
But it's not a fascist society.
It might be. It might be slightly fascist. It might be heading towards a fascist state. It could be half fascist. Yeah, there's degrees of fascism.
It's 10% fascist?
10% what?
But pointing this out, when you say use of force rather than persuasion democracy, and that's what fascist is, You still haven't actually told me how it is any of these Christian nationalists or any Christian nationalist propositions or any person making these propositions is doing anything other than saying that through persuasion and democracy, we can change and tailor society to fit our preferences.
And of course, Andrew brings it home full circle. After several minutes unpacking things like voting rights, competency, consistency, and political principles, he brings the conversation right back to where he started. Fascism. But it's not really about fascism. It's really the exploration of a much older question. What provides us with a legitimate moral framework and the authority to govern others? It's about whether empiricism and rationality are sufficient to justify society's moral obligations, or whether, as Andrew argues, they simply describe the world without telling us how we ought to order it. I hope you guys enjoyed this debate as much as I did. This is one of my favorites. So let me know what you think down in the comments, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. It's very much appreciated. Thanks, guys.